Buenos días a todos.
Good morning to everyone. You can get some relax now. Above anything, I would like to thank the institutions I represent, the official bar of agronomic engineers of Almeria, for having invited me, and also I'd like to thank the organizers, Fenci Nova, that they have allowed me to speak to you. I'll try and transmit to you the chronology of the events which have taken place during the last 70 years of technology improvements in agriculture in Almeria. We can start, isn't it? Right. We are in 1953. The National Institute for Settlements, which then was named afterwards IRIDA, set up the first irrigation plan for the Dalias field. That was the name, but today is referred to as the Poniente Almeriense, as the eastern side of the western side of Almeria. There were some crops, open air in sand, and green is a bit deceitful, because technologies use different kinds of color to help the analyzer, but Almeria was never that green. If we would take off the plastic sheaths, we will see it green. In 1970, it took some time for infrastructure, projects, etc. So in 10 years we had 7,000 hectares in sand, open air. And we have the first innovation for water savings, for water preservation. This belongs to the coastal line between Granada and Almeria. It seems that since the beginning of the 20th century, people would use these systems in La Rábita, El Pozuelo, and some of the settlers, the farmers coming to these new colonization towns, brought it over here. So all kind of farming, with the exception of substrate, is done over sand. And because of winds sweeping the area, there was a need to set up bush to protect from the wind. At that time, a tablar, which would be this irrigation unit, is protected with bush on the side. There would be the water, the inflow, and the carts would be flooded, irrigated by flooding or gravity. And that's how people worked for some years. And water in this situation doesn't want to work. It was just brought literally by fist. The person, of course, was posing for the picture, but the farmer would be with a pick handling the sand, and in that position it would be his wife or his son doing that. For example, these sacks should be applied over 3 plots, and at that moment fertirrigation was discovered with a very primitive technology. But if we understand fertirrigation as the application of fertilization through water, these farmers were already doing that. So the first greenhouses were appearing. The first one was in Paco, the pilot project, the pilot project of Paco. So it was the first plot, and in 1975, part of the 7,000 hectares were turned into greenhouses. What kind of greenhouse? a different technology developed in Almeria, following the structure that all vineyards would have. So it was the same system was used, and they were born on a frame, on a wire frame, and people thought that this frame could be covered with a thicker structure, and plastic sheet could be applied on top. So the first irrigation systems were put in place. It was by 1965, 1968 that this technology was commercially developed in California and Israel. So it reached Almeria quite early. We got some hits of the time in 1975. The Rural Bank of Almeria, or the Farmers Bank, set up the experimental station of Las Palmerillas, which is known in the world of agricultural research. Also in 1979, the research station of the National Institute for Farming Research was created. It is where IFAPA is right now located. In 1978, the official bar of agronomical engineers was created as a spin-off of the Eastern Andalusia bar. It was 78 people who set it up, but today there are some 1,800 engineers, active engineers in Almeria, even if I'm retired. And in 1979, transfer is created. Transfer is made to the regional government of Andalusia. And a great improvement was made, introduced in terms of the direct contact with farmers. We have a farming support technician, farming support engineer with a group of farmers. What are these farmers looking into? They are looking to something he's got in his hand. It's a tensiometer. We're talking of the end of the 70s. And I may tell you that in 1977, it was when I arrived in Almeria. I came by the hand of an institution who was dedicated to vocational training, and I was commissioned to work in the field of agriculture and education. And in the kind of equipment I had a portfolio with 2 tensiometers, and during the years I was delivering courses, I would show my tensiometers to farmers. It's been 5 years, and we have doubled the area. There are some 8,000 hectares of greenhouses. They're still open at Sunday. There's no reliable statistics of how outdoor farming collapsed, but by the beginning of the 90s you could still see open air plots. I think by 1995 nothing was farmed outdoors. Dripping irrigation reached about 5% of the area, and this innovation had a relatively slow growth. Why? Because the most costly element was the building of the dams, of the pools. So people would prefer to set up the greenhouse and do the manual irrigation rather than resort to the pools. Fertilizers were applied with the traditional spreader or distributor. It would be done still by fist. People would use their fist into the spreader. There was no rational criteria for the application of fertilizers. And the first tests were done of hydroponic farming without ground, without using the soil. And in 1975, there was a report showing that the irrigation setups, the infrastructure, was in poor condition because of the bad quality of drippers and systems, etc. So the School for Agricultural Engineers was created in Almeria. In the 90s, we grew in surface, in drippers, and we started with the traditional fertilizers. Water was not applied with technical criteria. Generally, the fertilization notes or forms, the files are expressed in amounts per hectare. And fertilizers use the water they want, but using the same file. So that's also telling us that there's something wrong there. At the beginning, with 800 hectares, different types of irrigation heads were put in place. Hydroponics, of course, needs automation. So we have from the most primitive, these are testing plot set up by Grodan, a 3,000 square meters. That was the head they had with hydraulic pumps. These are more sophisticated technology coming from Central Europe, which was very expensive. And this was more or less, well, pools which would be closed, the storeroom would be built on top, and water would enter the deposit, the fertilizers would enter there. So there was just a need to pump the solution, the fertilizer solution, with a programmer, with a simple programmer. The local Farmers Bank published in 1979 the first files on irrigation needs for crops. And that shed some light in that turmoil of random application of water. Crops grew. The area also grew in terms of substrate. Fertirrigation, automated fertirrigation equipment is also integrated into ground irrigation. Thanks to the pull, to the push of it being also down at the level of the substrate. Conductivity was also measured at this time. Even if this is not spread onto all plots. And tensiometers start to appear. The sheds were used, and people were invited to use that. The sector was not yet ready, neither the engineers, no sellers, no farmers, they do not know how to use it. I've seen hundreds of tensiometers hanging from storerooms, never used. They were put in place the first year, and that was all. The improvements were introduced. Standardization coefficients were improved, and from 7,000 cubic meters of water per hectare in 1982 went down to 5,500 in 1987. Right, in the year 2000, when a certain degree of stability was reached, these are the surfaces. Everything is irrigated with drippers. Sometimes, if you walk the fields for a full day, you will find a suction pump. But we have reached the peak in terms of substrate crops. It reached about 5,500 in 2007, but that's where it was. That was the limit. There's also a report of 2015 of the regional government of Andalusia saying about 57% of farms already count on our programmer. 13% of the plots are irrigated with a manual Venturi, and about 7% still uses direct aspiration onto the pump, mechanical pumps with no conductivity control. In 2017, the area over substrate was reduced. The reason for that, the main reason for that, is that substrate farming has taught us a lot. Everyone dealing with hydroponics have made a technical leap forward. So, for example, a tomato farm on the ground and a hydroponics tomato farm were different in terms of the vegetation. Very generative in hydroponics, very vegetative if on the ground. Differences are not that important today because of the handling of fertigation. There's less money to renew substrate, and there's also the problem of how to deal with waste, with rock wall, perlite, etc. This is the current situation of areas, of surfaces. Well, this is a short summary of the evolution of innovation. This is the year 1985, when the development of greenhouses started, drip irrigation with a bit of a random birth, but then a very steep slope in terms of growing. We talk about innovations influencing the adequate handling. Substrates, which had a very slow development, very fast leap in 5 years, and drop down. The use of programmers if you look into these, the step forward of hydroponics, sowing the ground, at this point where the fall of substrate farming went down, the setup of automation has started and is still growing. And what is still lacking for us to close the circle? Tensiometers, which are there. They may be about 10% of the surf of the areas. And if we speak about suction pumps, I just included the dot there, but they are not representative. We count on the physical elements. sanding, greenhouses and dripping, innovations which save water. But then we lack the non-physical aspects, software, knowledge to deal with these technologies. So what we should do would be to intensify dissemination of information, both in terms of specialists and agriculture and farmers. The knowledge is out there, is available in Almeria for dealing with irrigation. The Farmers Bank has got a lot of information. I'm sure you know these forms. There's even a software application which may use statistical data or real data and can help do the calculation in terms of irrigation needs. Also, the regional government has got the farmer support system. This is the weather station of La Mojonera, and we can get daily information on weather conditions. It gives us the evapotranspiration information, and with a series of correction factors would let farmers to do a very interesting follow-up. And they also count on forms with information. What is it that we also have information on? If you don't mind, there's private information set up by a series of engineers. And the blog administrator set it up, and after a year and a half or so, the administrator had registered 5 additional engineers for them to include information, especially in terms of biological actions, use of phytosanitaries. On the blog side, it's got some 1,500 entries, 3.5 million visits, from 1,300,000 visitors from 180 countries. The 60% of visitors are Spanish. The next biggest group of visitors is from Mexico, then from the USA and Portugal. So from the beginning of the year we had some technical problems, but the blog site is active. All the information you can find it without any problems. I'm going to give you a few examples. It meant making this available for colleagues, and this is an entry published by one of the colleagues, very clear. In yellow you have the values on how to deal with the tensiometers. This entry was dedicated to tensiometers and suction pumps. And there's another entry I'm going to show you having to do with fertigation. And I wanted to make clear for readers, I was using the example of a farm which had reached very reasonable production, and you may see how much you can get with just a little money. Just a water capturing vessel which helps us measure the conductivity of the nutritious solution. I highlight the conductivity of the supply of nutrients and the tensiometer. With just a little we could get a lot, and this is what I wanted to let you know. With the technologies we have, the quality leap we lack in Almeria means putting to good use suction pumps and tensiometers. That's not to match. Carlos has already said, but you've got to climb the ladder step by step. I'm going to finish, don't worry. I fear people suddenly using digital tensiometers, and I've been told to irrigate by 15, but the farmers who have not used a tensiometer, have broken it, have put in place, will not realize what they are doing. So we've got to be very careful. We should only put in the hands of farmers technology they can use. Thank you.